Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to move on with this week's theme of colors and check out a band called Black Country New Road. We've listened to them before on a live stream. It was an earlier one. I can't quite remember which one it was. And I was really blown away by what they were doing. So I'm really interested in getting to check them out with a full reaction here and seeing what they're doing now, because this is actually a release track from January of this year. So this is a modern song we're going to be listening to from them. All right, let's dive into this. The song's called Snow Globes. Interesting. So I really like the way the harmony is working. Sometimes an instrument will stay on a note. Like, listen. But what's most interesting to me is that we're working in a 9-bar phrase. And I love how each layer recontextualizes what we've already heard. Very interesting sound on the drums. They're a little dry, but they have a lot of width to them too. It's
let the clamp do what the clamp does best. I know you're coming home, Henry. Just tell me when. We must let the clamp do what the clamp does best. That's a funny looking shrine on your bedroom wall. Well, I'm sorry, Henry. He doesn't look anything like Jesus at all. Your friend, the one that you loved, did you keep him on your side? Did you ever get to ask body's right. But it is for this that God has gave us.
It's interesting that we haven't had any like metronome style percussion yet, or anything rhythmic really, other than the guitars laying down these eighth notes.
A small nation, souvenirs make Henry whole, but poor asleep. Oh God of weather, Henry knows. Snow globes don't shake on their own. Oh God of weather, Henry knows. Snow globes don't shake on their own.
I'm glad we brought everything back in. I was a little concerned that we were going to alternate between the layers and the vocals.
God of weather, Henry knows. Snow globes don't shake on their own.
This is not what I was expecting though. Really interesting that through all that chaos and pain, we're left with a melody with more movement and hope in it. Less sluggish.
Oh God of weather, Henry knows. Snow globes don't shake on their own.
Well, as I say that, they bring back this line. All right. Yeah, that's a tough song to listen to, I think. at least for me anyways, there's a lot of pain in that song that I think, I mean, it showcased very clearly, right? Not just in the vocal delivery, but also in the music itself. And I'm real eager to jump into the lyrics here, but as usual, I want to start off with the music, and we'll explore what I think's going on here, the story that's being told musically, before we dive into the lyrics and see if we can't find anything that kind of matches along those two. The first thing I want to start on is the structure. I think it's the most prominent idea here, and I mean, why does it feel like increasingly y'all are giving me uh, single single section songs? I feel like we've had this conversation a couple of times in past or in recent history. Um, yeah, this whole song is predicated on a single idea, right? We have this foundational thing with the guitars going on. Both of those guitars. Um, it's the eighth note idea where each, well, maybe not, maybe it's quarter notes. Yeah, it's quarter notes. And each beat is, or each bar is a specific note. They're not playing chords. It ends up becoming a chord once we look at how all the instruments play along with this idea. But it's that dun 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 dun. You get four notes per bar. Sometimes they play the same note for two bars, but a note does not change until you hit beat one of the next bar. Now, interestingly, I just sung right there that the first two bars is the same note, right? We have a grouping of four, and then the next four is the same note before it moves on. And what's really cool, I pointed this out once the second guitar came in, is that all of the time, actually, when an instrument is holding out a same note across two bars, some other instrument is moving, so we're changing the distance between the notes. When we only have the one instrument there, it sounds kind of flat. We're just staying on this one note, and then we move. Why do we stay on that one for such an extended period of time? It's because it lacks the context, right? Once we start bringing in the saxophone or the other guitar or the violin or whatever, that is when we can understand in context what that meant. And it's because another instrument is carrying the movement at that moment. That other instrument just isn't in play yet. So I really love those moments. I love how there's a little bit of that question asking. For the most part, we're moving forward on all nine of these bars in the phrase. Why are we staying stationary on this one? Why is it bars 1 and 2 when the first guitar is playing, but it's bars 4 and 5 when the second guitar is playing? Like, what's going on here? But once we get more instruments, some of this stuff begins to make sense. We can see how it's playing a root idea for movement in another instrument, for that movement to be contextualized. Like I've mentioned before, chordal properties are created by the distance between notes. If your notes are always, two whole steps apart, the emotion of the chord is going to be the same no matter what those three notes are, as long as the distance between them is retained. So in order to achieve a combination of emotions through your chord progression, you need to change the distance between your notes. So this is certainly one way to do that. You have one instrument. Obviously there's times when one instrument goes higher, one instrument goes lower. That's going to change distances. But another way is to have this element of stationary movement where one part of the chord doesn't move at all and another does. So yeah, it's really cool because part of this is a slow burn layering effect, right? And we've heard this hundreds of times on the channel. But the other way of thinking about this, which I think is a really cool way to go about it, especially for people who compose music, right? This might be an interesting way to think about things. They are showing you in real time how they build their chord, right? Because a lot of well, not a lot of them, the saxophone and the two guitars, occasionally the violin comes in with this idea, but the violin also plays a lot of its own lead melody element. But the saxophone and the two guitars pretty much stay on this quarter note idea, and they create the triads that the vocals and the violin sit above. And what you can do is you can hear one set of notes in the triads, and then we can hear the dyads, and then they bring in the triads, and you can see from a very foundational level how the chord progression is built. I think it's a really interesting way to go about it. Unlike layering, where we're introducing new ideas to the overall sound, which is what the violin is, which is what the drums are, which is what the vocals are, this layering allows us to see the chordal layering, and I think it's a really phenomenal way to understand their thought process in creating this underlying foundational element. And for prospective composers, this is something you might want to give a shot, right? Instead of trying to figure out, if you're having difficulty, especially if you're having difficulty, right? You've run into writer's block or whatever. Instead of trying to build out your entire, 16 bar phrase chord progression, start with a single note. Just write a melody line where the note changes every bar. Then stack something on top of that to create your dyads, then stack something on top of that. I think just hearing it like this, you don't even necessarily need to implement that as a slow burn idea yourself, right? But just building it that way rather than bar by bar, do it note by note. I think would be a good way to go about it, especially, like I said, if you're running into writer's block. But it's just really cool, again, to hear it like this. Not only just to kind of visualize it, oh, that's a technique I could utilize, but also to hear their thought process, how they went about crafting it. So that's really cool. Now, the other thing that was like super prominent here is noise and chaos. I noted it wasn't that long into the song. We'd begun to add all the layers. It was right before the vocals came in, and I thought I heard a little bit of drumming, but I wasn't sure because it was just like this faint tom run. And I was like, okay, that didn't really line up with any beats. What's going on with that? But I thought maybe I was just hearing things because it didn't come back. It was like a one and done kind of thing. And then it fades out, everything kind of drops back down to those two guitars, and the vocals begin singing. And I was like, okay, I'm getting into this. Vocals are a bit emotionally raw, but, I'm getting into this. And then everything starts building up again, and the drums come back in, and I realized, that was a tom run I heard. It wasn't in time with everything else, and that's because the drums are doing something very eclectic. They are not doing anything rhythmically with the rest of the band. In fact, they are there just to create another melodic layer, this time using the language of, I don't know, percussion? What would be, I was going to say non-pitched instruments, but toms, snares, cymbals, they have pitches to them. I don't know if they're necessarily anything I would assign to a key, and sometimes it's a conglomeration of pitches, kind of like the shimmer on a cymbal. I think would be really difficult to pinpoint a specific tone out of, but every time you hit the snare, it's the same thing, and we can tune the snare to have slightly different pitches by tightening the drum head up. The toms all have pitches. When you go down them from smallest to biggest, you get dooga 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 doo, right? You get a descending line. So it's not like they're non-pitched instruments. They're just, I don't know, I don't know a way to go about saying it. I lack the vocabulary for that. But yeah, so the drums are basically providing another melodic layer, just a layer of attack, I guess we could call it, rather than focusing on melody or harmony or chordal movement or atmosphere. It kind of does fit into the atmospheric area, it's kind of noisy, right? And I think the big difference here, not just that it doesn't seem to fit in with all the other melodic elements, because almost every other instrument actually, fits into the overall plan. It has a space for itself in the sound sphere. It finds spaces for itself in the composition. Every instrument kind of plays where others are resting, or they're harmonizing with what others are doing. Everything comes together to support this whole. But the drums are not a conducive element to the song, they're a disruptive element to the song. Their job is to just tear into a lot of the harmony going on and disrupt it. It's loud, it's noisy, it doesn't seem to be in time with anything. Mix wise, it kind of sits above everything. It takes the spotlight, it drowns everything out. It's louder than the vocals. Actually, everything kind of gets louder than the vocals at this point, but it's yeah, its job is to disrupt, and I don't think that has anything to do with it being the drums or the percussion. It's just the way that it's utilized here, and it's I don't quite know what it means. I have thoughts because at least the few lyrics I picked up seems to be about life, right? And growing up and trying to figure things out. And there's going to be things in life that don't make sense, that are difficult to cross or to conquer, to accomplish. I think that's what the drums represent. I don't quite know yet. We'll dig into the lyrics later and see if I'm right about the themes and kind of when things line up. But that's kind of the vibe I'm getting, especially since I think the song is about a father figure speaking to a child or just somebody younger than him, trying basically somebody trying to impose words of advice from having lived experience to a younger generation. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. And I think the music is supposed to be supporting those ideas, specifically talking about how large or difficult life could be, and just kind of gotten to power through it all. And like I said, when this big chaotic section was over, we kind of trimmed everything back down, but instead of paring down to just the guitars or the guitars with the saxophone like we saw the first time we started removing layers, we pared down to just the violin and something else. I don't remember what the something else was. But we got rid of that very monotone quarter note idea. Well, no, because it's still a quarter note idea, but we got rid of this static one note per bar, and we moved to two notes per bar. The da 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 da, jumping back and forth between two notes on each bar. And there's movement to this, right? There's it's like a dance. We have these two notes jumping back and forth rather than staying on one. And we'll see if that has any meaning once we dig into the lyrics. But I do think it's interesting that out of all that chaos, we found um, we found a new way of hearing the same thing we've heard before. Now, that kind of got shot out the window when we brought the guitars and saxophone back, and we returned back to that pedal one note per bar kind of idea to finish the song out. But I do think it's interesting that it took a while to get there, because to me that's the foundation of the song. That's supposed to be, since this is a one section song, the part that exists throughout every aspect of the track, and it is purposefully omitted right after the largest moment. I just I It has importance to me musically. That is a very conscious decision to make, to bring the spotlight to something that has never been given the spotlight, that has never been the core foundational element that drives the song, to be the only thing present. So I'm really interested in seeing what goes along with that. And the last thing I got to talk about is those vocals, right? Because they are They're powerful. Earlier I called them emotionally raw, and that's just because I think that's the nicest way to put it. They're not perfect vocals by any means. I don't think there's any pitch correction on them, so they are subject to human imperfections. Um, but even on top of that, it's a very raw performance. There's a lot of vocal cracks in it. There's some intonation things that are going on where it's not always perfectly on the note that they would be aiming for if they wanted a perfect amount of consonants in the sound. It constantly kind of interweaves between like this more strong, hearty chest voice and sort of like a wavering, um, like mixed chest and head. And the wavering part, it's like it moves from solid foundation into uncertainty. Right? There are moments when he's in the lower range where it feels he's very comfortable in, and it's just a very full bodied sound. It sounds very confident. And when he goes up, half an octave or so, maybe a full octave, and I don't feel like it has as much confidence. I don't know if he's as comfortable in that area. But it's important for the song because it brings in these characteristics to the vocal delivery that I think are important to the lyrics. Again, when we dive in, I'm going to try to match the different areas of the song to the words because I think that what the song is doing and how he's saying the words, how he's delivering them, have a lot of import to them. They were chosen specifically to pair with the words themselves that are being said. This might be a song that ends up opening itself more to me on a second listen if I keep the lyrics page open while I'm listening to it. Um, but yeah, the vocals to me, like this, there's a story being told in the music, right? We start out with a singular thing and it slowly grows, and then there's chaos that gets added, and things kind of die down a little bit, but the chaos is always there and it builds back up. And when the chaos leaves for good this final time, there's a different idea sitting at the root of the song. All of this tells me a story of family in a sense, especially given some of the lyrics that I've heard. That's definitely a mindset I'm put into. But, this idea is about one becoming more and more being chaotic. One is simple, more is chaos. And that, to me, is a very human idea, right? It's very simple to be alone. It may not be easy, but it's simple. When you add more people to an equation, things become more chaotic, but part of that chaos is what makes us human. And those are some of the vibes I'm getting from this music. And then just pairing it with some of the words I've picked up. There's a story being told on every level here, and I think it's really interesting. Um, and I don't know where I was going with that. I guess I'm gonna dive into the lyrics here and see what's going on in this track. And man, double-edged sword. I actually really enjoy discovering a journey or a story in the music and then listening to the lyrics and saying, I don't see how this fits at all. It's an interesting thing because it brings more pieces to the puzzle. It makes the puzzle larger, and I don't know about you, but I'd much rather solve a 300, 500,000 piece puzzle than an 8 or a 16. Those are too simple. They don't provide the intellectual stimulation. So, you know, I certainly love, right? There's this really good feeling about looking at the music and talking about themes that do show up in the lyrics because I'm like, man, first of all, beautiful composition there. They perfectly explained the themes of the lyrics in another language, in the language of music. And I'm like, yeah, so that's really cool on their part. It's really cool on my part. Makes me feel like I'm doing a really good job of this analysis. I'm picking up on the things the way that they were intended and, drawing the right conclusions. Makes me feel like I'm doing my job right. But there's also, like I said, this other time when I read the lyrics, I'm like, I don't see how this is connected at all. It has nothing to do with the themes that I was talking about. And so I'm like, man, did I miss something? But at the other time, I'm like, this puzzle just got bigger. Let's get into it. And that's kind of what I'm feeling right here. Like, I completely misconstrued a lot of things here. And part of that's because, like I said, I only picked up a couple of lyrics. Um, there's really only two ideas here, and I thought there were more. So we have the narrator speaking to Henry, but not speaking to Henry. Says, I know you're coming home, just tell me when. And then he says, it's a funny looking shrine on your bedroom wall. I'm sorry, Henry, he doesn't look anything like Jesus. Your friend, the one that you loved, did you keep him on your side? And like, I kind of get the feeling, because like the second half, it's like he's speaking directly to Henry, but I mean, he prefaces with, I know you're coming home, just let me know when. So it could be in a letter of sorts that all of this is written, but it also could just be an inner monologue of the narrator, of the main character here. So these could all be rhetorical questions that the narrator is interested in the answer, but hasn't, you know, gotten the guts to ask Henry about yet, to actually have this conversation, or maybe he just doesn't have the means to ask them, right? I don't know where Henry is. It could be a letter to Henry who is gone, um, you know, gone to war or moved away or whatever. But it could also be that Henry has passed, and this is a monologue about things that the narrator's trying to, or would have wanted to ask, maybe. He says, "Did you ever get to ask what on earth he meant?" So this is Henry's friend. Did you ever get the chance to ask your friend what he meant by "might take some time to learn how to use these bodies right, but it is for this that God gave us both the night." And to me, that makes Henry's friend seem less of a platonic friend and more of a romantic friend. And it says, and Henry hung to all of these. His battleship of memory, a small nation of souvenirs, make Henry whole but porously. So these memories of Henry's, Henry's memories made him feel whole, but also porous. So having holes in him, which is a really interesting, like play on word. Like he could have said whole but holes, or made a play on the word of whole, because whole means complete, but also holes are things that make things incomplete. But switch it up for porously, which doesn't rhyme with anything, which is a very just deliberate thing to do, because that's not a word I think most people have in their vocabulary just to whip out at any time. And especially, like I said, when the play on words is already there. It almost seems like they purposefully went out of their way not to do this idea with whole but with holes, and to not even rhyme it. Pick a word that doesn't rhyme at all, but also to continue to give this impression that these memories uh, did not complete Henry. Right? There's obviously still something missing. And then the song just finishes out with, God of weather, Henry knows that snow globes don't shake on their own. And I really got nothing here. Especially the opening idea says we must let the clamp do what the clamp does best. And like part of me is just thinking, okay, this is just a metaphor for anything else. Most things have purposes. You can't really fight your purpose, right? Tools have a job. If you use them for something that's not their job, they're not going to do it as well. Things might get done, but it ain't going to be as perfect. And especially since we're talking about humans and humanity and people, it kind of makes me think that, kind of alluding to the idea that we can't force somebody to do something that they don't want to. But then it's repeated a second time just two lines later. we must let the clamp do what the clamp does best. And it makes me think that there's a lot of emphasis on this clamp, and I don't know specifically what they're referring to. A clamp holds things in place, but Henry's gone. And I don't know, much like when we checked out Tori Amos's I Can't See New York, I feel like I've been thrust in the middle of something. Is this album, Ants from Up There, that came out in February, is this a concept album? Am I in the middle of a story right here? Because I do feel like I'm missing some context for who these people might be, what the clamp is. Uh, you know, I just, I don't know. This is where you guys come in, I guess. Let me know what's going on here. Like, I'm definitely getting some ideas of humanity in here and just like some overarching ideas of what it means to be human. The idea of letting the clamp do what it does best. Snow globes don't shake on their own. I mean, that one's pretty self explanatory. If you want things to happen, you got to do it. Um, but like how all this relates to Henry and the narrator and Henry's friends. I mean, the shrine on the bedroom wall doesn't look like Jesus. Like, okay, am I missing something? Is the narrator heavily religious? Was this something that Henry and the narrator got into before? I don't know. And then, of course, it all could just be a metaphor, right? It's all done in a very spoken word kind of way. And aside from a couple of choice lines, it's very colloquially said. It feels like, I mean, I keep reading this and I feel more like I'm reading poetic literature than song lyrics. And I know that's probably like a very thin line between those two, but to me, literature and sung words have two very different cadences to them and two very different purposes. And those difference in purposes tend to show up in different ways of writing. And this just does not come off to me as lyrical writing. This comes off to me as poetic writing. Um, and then like so the refrain, the god of weather, Henry knows that snow globes don't shake on their own. That I think is, I mean, that's the part of the song where the vocalist is at his breaking point. It feels like that is where his voice is cracking most often. It is when the drums have come in. It's when every layer is here. It's the most chaotic section. I was really thinking that we were going to hear something extremely emotional, and it might be in context with the album, right? But on its own, I mean, I kind of get the vibe here, like the idea that if you want something to happen, you need to force it to happen. You can't wait for things to happen to you. Um, but why that is like as emotional as it needs to be in the song, I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something here. At this point, I think the song is telling me more of a story than the lyrics are. And I mean, I do understand the musical language a lot more than I understand English. As noted in a lot of these lyrical analyses, I don't always see through the metaphors. Music speaks to me. Words, poetic analysis is just not my forte. But it's usually not at this level that I just can't find any of the emotion in the song, in the lyrics. So I'm really curious if there's like a really big aspect that I'm missing here. And my hypothesis is that I'm in the middle of a story. I'm in the middle of a concept album and I'm missing all the events that have led up to this, or maybe some of the emotional impacts of the relationship between Henry and the narrator, and or maybe even just extra outside context. Maybe Henry is somebody that the singer knows, and this is a song that doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the album, but something to do with one of the musicians' lives, right? And knowing about their life and pairing this with events from their life would provide that extra context. But on its own, I'm not seeing the emotional impact here that I am in the music. But those are my thoughts on Black Country New Roads Snow Globes. This is where you guys come in, hit me up in the comments, let me know what you thought of this one, if you enjoyed it or not, anything that stood out to you, anything that I touched on that maybe I didn't completely dive into, you thought I was like right on the cusp of understanding something, and you want to clear that up for me, go ahead and let me know. Above the comment section, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And right below that is a description box, and there is a link for Linktree. It'll take you to this menu right here. It has links for everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, and vote on future themes and songs, submit special selections, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord community, and chat with me. I'm pretty active in there. There's also the whole community in there as well. So, I mean, it's just a really fantastic place to go to. All right, that does not wrap it up for today. About 11 minutes ago, we released the special selection for today, which is a band called Painted in Exile, I think. Yep. No idea what's going on there. That album art it's interesting. You might want to check that out. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We'll be continuing on with our the colors theme, and another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.